Welcome, everyone, to the C-Suite Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. And today we have a really interesting topic and guest. On is CMO James Krouse. James, you've been in the B2B industry for probably longer than we all want to admit. Me, the same thing, right? But what we're going to talk about today is something that all of us have to be doing as anyone who's marketing, who's trying to get the attention of the B2B buyer these days, which is harder and harder, right? As they're kind of going down this more of a self-service path where they're doing most of the research well in advance of even wanting to talk to anybody in the company. So we're talking today about how do we reframe the conversation? How do we do this in a way that extols a unique point of view? Because we can't be talking status quo. We can't be saying the same things that everybody else. We can't be talking about just product, just service, right? We have to be talking in a way that supports them, right? That educates them, that lifts the eyebrow a little bit, right? And gets to the curiosity so they want to spend some time talking with us. What we're talking about that is reframing the conversation in a very positive way. And so, James, you've got a unique job where you're at right now at Eastridge Staffing Solutions, right? And you're working with some of the biggest industries and industry players out there. Tell us maybe though, before we kind of get into the core of the conversation here, tell us a little bit more about your background and what you're doing right now, and then we'll jump on in.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, and thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm a chief marketing officer at Eastridge Workforce Solutions, it's been an interesting journey for me because staffing is not the world that I grew up in from a career standpoint. I basically grew up doing B2B marketing and landed in staffing just through that pathway. It still is a B2B message. I like to think about staffing and sort of that broader world of workforce solutions as being almost like the ultimate conclusion of a B2B marketing career, because you're a lot of times you're dealing with things that are in B2B, you're dealing with things that are or can be interpreted as a commodity. And when you kind of start off with that, if you're selling, I've worked with paper manufacturers. Georgia Pacific was one of the first clients that I worked with when I was at an agency in New York, or Crown Holdings that make cans. Like these are bread and butter, like stuff people make, and like I said, by and large, will be sold, and even like a customer relationship built on the price of that item, the price per item, and how low it can go. In each of those industries, though, there was always a leader that saw some value in finding just that cutting edge, just that leading edge of difference. Just a little bit something that could make something different, or that they could sell into into a new market. I'll keep on the cans and the paper, for example. Selling paper into graphic designers. At the time, in the late '90s, they were still printing annual reports out, and so doing a series of interviews with the designers of those annual reports and looking at their paper selection. I actually had the opportunity to interview Michael J. Fox for the Fox Foundation and the selection of the paper for the Fox Foundation as just an example of how far you can kind of go down. And it was really kind of talking to the client about, hey, what is different here? How can we kind of articulate that difference, and how can we tell a story about it? So yeah, there's always going to be a bit of the business that's going to be about commodity. It's going to be price driven, but there's so much more than that. I think with staffing, it's very much the same thing where, the need that the customer has is very much about, commodity. They need to find talent. They need to find workers for their factory, or they need to find, paralegals for their law firm. But if they're not working with somebody that they trust, And if they're not building out on the culture of their company, then they're really just, they're really just kind of outsourcing a very vital part of their company to the lowest bidder. And I think that, like with any client, it's about finding that right fit, so that you can tell those stories. And I'm very fortunate because Eastridge is a company that very much um, takes that partnership seriously, takes those relationships seriously, and takes company culture seriously. And I think that that's something that is that's really important to, well, any kind of B2B firm, is that you have to or any I'm sorry, any kind of B2B business, is that at the heart of it, there's got to be something that's different. And it's a matter of telling that story and articulating that story. I don't think that you can fabricate it. You can't just make it up. It's got to be something that's truthful. So I think that it's been an interesting journey for me. Like I said, going from working with, you know, machinery manufacturers to, a company that really takes building the culture of a company seriously. It's an interesting B2B arc.
And you're working in a B2B environment with clients that, um, you know, are the industry leaders like we talked about at the beginning. But one of the things that's interesting, right, is because those companies, they've used staffing workforce solutions before. This is nothing new to them, right? Yet you're trying to, in a way, reinvent how we can work with you, right? And
Mhm.
one of the things you just mentioned there was company culture and how that makes a difference. I literally just about a month and a half ago had a phenomenal conversation on a podcast here with the CRO of the year of a B2B company and his teammate, his CMO. And they came on, they literally attributed over 50% of their success to their company culture,
Mhm.
the retainment and the recruitment of the right kind of people, and then how you bring that team together, and then how that team executes.
Mhm.
Right,
Mhm.
and I know that from my past life in terms of, just trying to launch my own companies and going after original rounds and second rounds of funding. There's a lot that like VC, PE firms do. They invest as much in the people, right, as the business plan, right, as the model, right? So part of what you're talking about and how you're reframing the conversation is the importance of the people, right? And the importance of dedicating the right resources to get the right people so that the right kind of systems are in place and success can be had.
Mhm.
That's a different conversation than how cheap can I get a service, right? And get a new employee. That's already reframing the conversation there.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
well, no, I was gonna launch into, asking you about one of the stories that you had from, in your past in terms of, working with I think it was in the hospitality industry, uh, about how much getting the right team and working strategically with the client, how much that makes a difference in their bottom line, in their business, and how they even think about operating.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I think, yeah, this example was, when I was working with, in the hospitality industry. One of the, customer case histories that I was doing, involved a GM, and it wasn't for one of our bigger hotels. It wasn't for a very expensive hotel. We worked with a lot of luxury properties that had very impressive, marquees. But, this was just a basic, like, airport hotel, you know, and, talking to the GM there, he was a guy who had, he was actually he was a teacher and a football coach before he, was in hospitality. And, he talked about coming on board to this, hotel as the housekeeping manager, and basically, everyone was working overtime. The front desk manager was also turning over rooms, and basically no one knew what their position was on the team, was how he put it. And really just being able to work with our company to build up that staff, and to really kind of turn things around. He really kind of described it as being this breath of fresh air that it was like suddenly everyone kind of knew exactly what they were doing. They had the resources in order to get it done. And I think because they were paying, less in overtime and less in recruiting and working with our company, they were actually able to do it within budget. And I think that that's a great example of really kind of digging in and not just asking somebody to say something nice about your company, but asking them to tell a story. What's a challenge that they faced? What is and you really have to dig deep for it because I think that a lot of times when people when they're talking to somebody in marketing, they right away want to go to like that, yeah, working with you guys have been great and it's a fantastic relationship and we love it. You know, that's great. It's a great testimonial, but like, hey, what are your challenges? What are you trying to solve as a company? Where are you trying to go? What are you trying to do, and how are we helping to get you there? Or even just not even touching on the how are we helping to get you there. Let's just talk about where you're going. Let's just talk about what your goals are as a company and how you've achieved those goals or how you're going to achieve those goals. When you get people kind of talking through that kind of thing, it not only sometimes relate, results in a great story, but it gives you so much more background into an insight into what it is that's driving your customers. One of the things that we've done at Eastridge is we did a survey last year of our customers and also our prospects, people who are in the business of basically hiring a staffing firm. And the one thing that came back over and over and over again was quality. Quality was really really important. And on the face of it, it didn't seem like that was that big of a revelation. I mean, yeah, of course, quality. And I think that kind of comes from my B2B background too, where it's like quality in manufacturing tends to be a commodity, but in staffing, it's not. And when we started to dig deeper into what did they mean by quality, it had to do with, sourcing the candidates that had, the right skills and the right cultural fit for their company. And that could be everything from, like I said, like a paralegal. I've talked to our staff about, the legal industry and the law firms that we work with, just as a kind of like side example. And they're very careful to find out, okay, what is really important about your law firm? How is it different? What is the culture of that law firm? Because they vary widely. So if you're like a, high pressure situation where everyone is working, tons of hours and you can get ahead and work with large clients and that's what you want, then you're going to find one candidate. If you're more of a family oriented firm and the hours are a little bit different and you're very family friendly, that's going to find you a different kind of candidate. And a staffing partner that can do that is going to find you, the best candidate probably faster and more efficiently than somebody that it doesn't take the time to really ask those questions and find out those details. And so I think that, listening to those stories can give you insight, not just, to write, one piece, but to formulate your whole strategy moving ahead.
You know what it reminded me of? And we didn't even talk about this before, but this is from years and years ago when I was, Nike was one of my clients, and they had a hiring philosophy that they wanted to hire the right corporate athlete, the the individual, right, that was passionate, loved to be there, and whatever task you gave them, they were going to be able to accomplish that and move forward. Because if we really look at it, the cost in an organization, almost always, you know, one of the biggest overhead costs is employees. And one of the biggest, areas that you can actually manage costs is
Mhm,
reducing employee turnover. Right.
mhm,
So going back to hiring the right people for whether it's the family focused law firm or this is a law firm where we've got really great clients, but man, you're going to be churned. You're going to be burned out, right? And but it's going to be a notch in your career.
mhm,
There's very different people that fit into different organizations and different cultures, but there isn't a company alive. It isn't saying I need to reduce my cost, my overall cost of overhead related to employees. Then one of the best ways to do that is just to hire the right people in, right, and
mhm,
then have the right culture, to do that. So you've now reframed the conversation, right? This isn't about how do we get something very, very quick, right? And how do we do this most ineffective, efficiently and the lowest cost. This is about a long-term strategy for your business.
Mhm. Yeah.
That is
Right.
perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, and it really is. I mean, to your point about reframing the conversation, it starts to get to what is really important to your customers, and it's having that mindset because I think in the B2B realm, you do run into a lot of, like I said, commodification, and that can permeate like everything, and that can permeate a sales organization, that can permeate like leadership. And like I said, usually when a company recognizes the need for marketing, they're usually like, even just that recognition, they're like 4 or 5 steps ahead of their competition because it's like, we have a great story to tell, and we want to tell that story. And I think that also relates to a lot of the even a lot of the tools that are out there that are related to like SEO, search engine optimization, and like, there's plenty of companies out there that are like, "Hey, I want to be on the number one page of Google." You're like, "For what? Like, what do you want out of that?" Because it's like that's based on what people are searching for. So, okay, let's use those tools. Let's figure out the conversations that are happening out there, and then let's figure out which ones we want to be part of, and then what our part is going to be. And so now it's a much more complex, conversation that's out there that, like I said, a lot of B2B companies are just not, they're just not doing that kind of in-depth, work that it takes to really analyze what the conversation actually is before they even say something.
Yeah. And that conversation, here's the way that I look at that is that, and this is a stat that is just amazing, that the connection, the sense of connection to a company from a B2B buyer is as important as what that company actually does.
Mm. Mhm.
What that means is that connection is this is a company that can actually help me do something for me, help educate. It's that trusted advisor, that expert status, right? And this is an area that I wanted to get into because once you decide I'm going to reframe the conversation in the positive ways that we've been talking about, well, how do you do that? Right. And that typically is done by the content that precedes the conversation, right? That sparks the conversation. In fact, I think Forbes put it great. They said, content marketing solves problems, thought leadership sparks conversations. So if we're trying to spark conversations that are reframing that conversation and getting that interest, tell me a little bit about your thoughts on, thought leadership content and how and the role that plays in the organization.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, it's just it's so important in terms of partially it is reframing that conversation. So it's positioning yourself above, a commodity, that you are a trusted advisor, that you do know, more in depth, about a field than your clients do, which is sort of a natural extension. Yeah, one of the things that I talk to our sales team about is a lot of times they'll be a little bit resistant to, a very sort of typical, sort of salesperson approach is like, you know what, your marketing stuff, that's fine, but I just kind of want to wing it, and I just have a conversation with my client, or I want to hear them talk, and that's fine, like I think that's fine. But what I remind them is like they've come to us expecting expertise. They're not in a therapy session. Yeah, you do wanna learn more about, the client. You do wanna learn more about what they do and what their challenges are, but you also want to be ready with some strategies, that have been proven to work, and then also be able to talk more broadly about, some of the things that we just discussed today. So, I mean, when the way that I view like thought leadership is, it gives you a chance to address some of those things that are, hey, did you think about it this way? Did you think about, if you're trying to build company culture, maybe you should look at your staffing partner because they might be able to help you with that. Have you thought about, even just like the phrase, candidate quality? And I thought this was very interesting internally when we were talking about candidate quality and said, oh, we have to talk about this. We have to put it in all of our marketing material. We have to do this. And somebody within our organization said, uh, how are you defining that? How are we even defining what candidate quality is? Because it could mean a lot of things. Like it could mean turnover, and we had a whole conversation about that, where it's like we're able to do a deeper dive into like why quality counts in staffing and what it is and sort of how do we actually define it, because it's not just turnover, because turnover could be related to how you're managing people. It's not just about pay, because that can be an inaccurate kind of statement. It's not just about sort of the volume of candidates that you're getting. How do you actually define quality? And I think that's when it gets into thought leadership, where you're able to broaden out that conversation and get people thinking and feeling about your company and your brand in a whole different way. Um, I think that's a major role for thought leadership that's out there. It's kind of the best way to describe it is to get people to think a little bit differently about. I mean, it gets back to what you're talking about, which is reframing the conversation. And thought leadership can can be that and can kind of do that. And that can be in very direct or very indirect ways. One of the things that we've done, we're doing right now, is having these conversations between our CEO Seth Stein and other leaders out in the industry. It started off with talking about company culture, and I think that there'll be other conversations that Seth has with other leaders out there. But it's just as much about like the fact that the conversation is happening, and less about what's actually being said, or sort of direct business that's related to it. And I think it kind of goes to that point that we were talking about, which is like we don't always want to talk about our clients or our prospects as just you know the kind of business targets that we're going after. It really is, these are people, and these are people who are running companies, and they are doing that for a lot of reasons, some of which are about making money, some of it's just about, passion that they have. But I run into more, CEOs that care about their organization and care about the vendors and the partners they work with more than anything else. And if you can capture that, and reach them with something like thought leadership, that, all the better.
You know, tremendous what you guys are doing, what Seth is doing out there in having these conversations, right? With others that are wondering the same kind of things about what is the impact of company culture. And what it does is it takes, there's not a B2B organization out there that doesn't want to move on the scale from vendor to partner, right?
Hmm.
Last thing we want to be is a vendor, right?
Hmm.
Because a vendor's commoditized. A vendor is anybody can kind of do this, right? A
Hmm.
partner is somebody that has much more of an impact.
Hmm.
And the only way you're going to have an impact, right, is if you're in the middle of the important conversations that all of your audience, your ICP, is having to deal with and they're having to think about. And if you're bringing that conversation together, like Seth is doing, right, and that's one good topic, then what you're doing is now you're adding to the overall conversation. You're adding to, you know, the ability to educate and understand and make changes based on what's happening all around you within the industry. I think
Hmm.
that's fantastic.
Hmm.
Uh, I,
Yeah, and I think it also gives, one of the things we talked about quality, there's also like service and expertise, which was like other things that came out of that survey that I was talking about. And it's a double-edged sword, because it's like, people talk about like, well, service is really important to me in staffing. And it's kind of like, well, what do you mean by that? Because like like everyone says that they offer great service. It kind of issues a challenge to your organization then to dig down and sort of say, well, how do we articulate that? How do we demonstrate great service? one of those ways can be with thought leadership, because it shows, hey, look, I'm looking out for trends that are out there that you may not have. I'm looking out there from, from an expertise standpoint. Like, we have an entire legal team that offers advice to clients that gives them insight into labor markets and compliance, which is, you know more complex now than ever. And so articulating that, it really comes across in the most genuine way through thought leadership. Because if there's no better way to demonstrate that you have expertise, or that you're offering, service above and beyond, than to just come out and say it. And maybe it's a, byline article by the legal team on a new law coming out in California, that kind of thing. It aligns with the values that are important to your to your clients and to your prospects.
And it takes cycles away from the sales process. CRO that I was just talking to, and he oversees all of sales, all of marketing, all of customer success. So the whole revenue engine. And he said, one of the best things that happens is when we have a first conversation and they acknowledge, oh yeah, we're just, we're now talking to you, but we know you guys. Right?
Mhm,
Because they've been consuming the content that they've been creating. Right. So they
mhm,
already have that sense of connection. They already feel like they know, and they already feel like they respect
yeah,
and trust that organization. That is a tremendous way to start the conversation, right?
mhm,
And takes cycles away instead of having to build that trust in those initial conversations. Obviously, you're going to support it, right? But
yep, mhm,
if salespeople are supposed to be trusted advisor, then as much as the brand and the thought leadership can position the entire company as thought leaders, right? As trusted advisors, then you're just that much farther ahead.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So I know we could go talk for another hour right here, but we've covered a lot of territory. If there was, in terms of reframing the conversation, if there was a single takeaway that you had for us, right, for the audience to leave us with, what would that be?
I think, you know, I, I think that it's important to always challenge the status quo when it comes to B2B marketing, because it's always easy to say that things are just about price, or that from a sales perspective, this kind of thing can seem a little bit abstract. But when you drill down and you kind of get down to it, if you are able to say something really simple, this is where I always start with people, because we talk about case histories, we talk about thought leadership, and it can seem, like, I mean, they're marketing terms, and I understand, our audience and everything, but like, to people in sales and everything, it sounds like, oh, okay, that's really nice, but you know what? It's about a handshake and a smile, and I sprinkle the sales fairy dust on things, and make everything happen. What I always tell them is like, let's just talk about stories where we were able to help a company succeed. And if you can sit down with somebody and say, look, I was able to help company A, B, C, D, and that can be, recognizable names, or that can be recognizable names within the industry. You know, there are strategies that we've worked with them to employ, and have been successful for them. And I'd love to share those strategies with you. So I think at the very base of it, it is about like storytelling, and it's about this need of hearing a story and telling a story. But then it's also like, hey, I'm just sharing with you some information that is probably helpful to you. That always sparks a good conversation, both in terms of how a prospect or a client reacts to it, but then also how internally you frame things. It's like, you know what, we're just going to tell stories. We're just going to tell the stories about how we're successful, how we're helping people out. And that's served me well through my whole career. So I think it always starts with storytelling. Now, whether or not that's telling the story of client success, or telling a story about a leadership perspective on a business, like we were talking about with culture. No matter what, it's like, if you enter into it with that spirit of of sharing information that you believe is valuable to other people, you're going to get a good reaction to it.
Yeah, and it always helps, right? We're all supposed to be storytellers as marketers, and it's good to talk strategy, it's good to talk theory, but it's also good to see in application, like how did that help? What really happened there, right? And to tell that story, it brings it to life. Mhm. So, James, if there was follow-on conversations that people wanted to have and questions for you, would it be appropriate to send them a link to your profile on LinkedIn? Would that be a good
Oh
way to
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, LinkedIn is a great place to start for that, and always happy to engage in dialogue.
Well, fantastic. Well, thank you for coming on and sharing your insights. I will say, if we can reframe the conversation in the staffing industry, which has been around for as long as there's been business, all right, then I think we can do it. That's the takeaway I have here from this: is that as B2B marketers, we need to be constantly thinking about that and how do we do that. And so this has been very, very inspirational. I appreciate it.
Oh, terrific. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a lot of fun.